Welcome, Kylie. Thank you so much for being here today and joining us. I would love to just jump right in. And if you can share with us a little bit about what you do, your business journey, and how you came to create the School of Inspired Work.
Awesome. Thanks, Tova. Hi, first. Thanks for having me, and thanks for inviting me to talk about this. I love talking about inspired work, so I'm really thrilled that we're going to be able to have a chance to talk about this today.
Awesome.
So, let me share a little bit just about my story, where I've come from, and how the New School for Inspired Work came into being. And where it started for me was about 8 years ago. And at that time, I was working in another field altogether. I had a business in the field of marketing, and I had been running that business successfully for about 6 years. And why, again, I use the air quotes, is because it was successful by all external measures. I had amazing clients. I was doing work I enjoyed. I was paid very well to do the work. The work came to me easily. And so by everyone else's standards, I should have been content and happy. But what I noticed when I was about 6 years into that work, I began to feel, at first it sort of started with the restlessness, and then it evolved into frustration and anger and even rage. And I know, and some people who end up working with me can really relate to that process. And for me, where it was coming from was I was in a field or I was doing work essentially where I was actually starting to feel like within myself, I was shriveling and dying. And what I mean by that was who I was not really coming out into the world. Now, at the time, I probably couldn't have articulated that and maybe didn't have consciousness around that. But what it felt like within me was that who I was getting smaller and smaller. And there was this frustration. There was this idea within myself that there was something more for me, but the frustration was coming from I didn't know what that more was, and I had no idea how to figure it out. And so what happened was I continued to do that work for months and even years, and that's where that frustration, it turned into anger and it turned into rage. And eventually what ended up happening is I ended up just walking away from that business. And in terms of making change, I would say to people, maybe do as I say, not as I do, which goes against common wisdom, because I tend to make big leaps into the unknown. And that's my change pattern. It's how, I don't usually move through change very gracefully. So I tend to make these big, awkward leaps and to sort of force myself to move through change. But what that ended up looking like for me, so I walked away from that business and I thought, okay, I'm going to enter into this period of exploration and figure out what is it I want to do. And right away, that period of exploration turned into a period of depression. And what happened for me was I set aside this time and space to do this exploratory work, but went right into a depression. And I had already been through a pretty serious depression a decade earlier, and that helped me in that particular situation because from the previous depression, I had learned two things. And one of them was somewhere in my life, I had given away my power and I needed to reclaim it. And why I say that is actually a very important part of the process I now share with people, because a lot of discovering our inspired work is about reclaiming who we are and our power. Yeah. And the other thing I knew about depression was that it was temporary. It was serving a very valuable purpose in my life. And so what that meant was I gave myself permission to be there. Mm-hmm. And I like to share this part of my journey about depression. Number one, because I do meet a lot of people who are in a similar state. But number two, because I actually really credit my ability to stay in the uncomfortableness of it. I credit that with my successful transformation from work into my inspired work. Mm-hmm. That was a really important aspect of my journey, was to let all the old that needed to fall away. And that's really what the depression was about. Mm-hmm. Now, in terms of, how did I start to move through it and come out of it, there was a really key component for me. And that component was this. I was depressed essentially because the question I was asking myself was, what is it I should be doing for work? What am I supposed to be doing? And I think many people can relate to that. The people who are on the search, they're seeking, they're on the quest, they want to find their purpose in life. What should I be doing? And the problem with that question is that there actually is no answer. And it's what keeps us all out of our power. And so when I came to the realization that there's nothing I should be doing with my life, that actually was a bad day. But what happened really quickly after that was the question shifted. Because I kept waking up and I thought, okay, well, if there's nothing I'm supposed to be doing, but I'm still here, what is it I want to do? And that shift of question for me was key, because it meant that I stopped looking out into the world to figure out my answers, and I started to tune into who I was. And then I realized I had to go through a phase of trying to figure out, well, who am I? Like, I can't even answer that question. I don't know what I want. And I think, again, the work I do with people, it's a lot about helping them being able to answer that question. So as I stepped into that place of tuning into myself and tapping into my own heart's desires, what I noticed happened was that the way forward started to appear for me.
Wow.
Yeah. And so instead of having to make it happen, it kind of began to unfold in front of me. And the very first step, I ended up teaching business. And what happened as a result of that is people started to come to me to help them start their businesses. But I noticed that there was this big piece missing, which was this clarity piece. They don't know exactly who they are. They don't know exactly what they have to offer. They just had this notion that they wanted to start a business, but they didn't know what it looked like, what they had to give, and how to create something to actually give what they had to give. So from that, as I began to work with people and taking them through the same process over and over again, eventually it evolved into the Vision Program, and eventually the Vision Program developed into the New School for Inspired Work. And that whole journey came about from my own understanding of who I am and what I have to give. And the more I gave it, the more clarity I got about what I had to give. And that's essentially how the New School for Inspired Work was born.
That is amazing. And I think my favorite part in all of that is hearing that as you were doing the inner work, first of all, that the questions came to you. It's almost like Spirit spoke to you and said, stop looking without, stop saying what, and it's all about who am I? And that even the inner question shifted. But what I love even after that is because you were doing the inner work, the path appeared. I mean,
Yes.
It sounds like magic.
It feels like magic when you're in it.
Yeah.
It's not always easy,
Yeah.
but it definitely feels like flow. Like you definitely get into a place where the information starts to come to you, and that's where clarity begins to come, when we start to receive the information.
Mm-hmm. And I also love, I think it is really important for people to understand that it's not just a snap of a finger. There was this process. It's like the path appeared, but you still had to keep walking forward, and the clarity kept coming. Would you say that's accurate?
100%, and it continues so. Like I've been doing this work for over 5 years now, and the more I do the work, the more clarity I receive.
Yeah, I love that. So maybe we can talk a bit about like what is inspired work? What is that?
Well, and that was what, for me, when I was going through the depression, and I'm going to finish off sort of what happened that'll tail into this idea of what is inspired work.
Awesome.
Because for me, I realized the reason I was depressed was because the question I had been asking myself was, what should I be doing? Mm-hmm. Isn't there something I'm supposed to be doing? Like, I'm sure there's some work I'm supposed to be doing out in the world. But there was no answer to that question, and that would kind of send me deeper into depression. And then one day I realized I was asking the wrong question. And the correct question is, what do I want to be doing? And, an even truer question that comes up is, who do I want to be?
I love that, yeah.
And so for me, that was the big shift from being stuck, because where I see people get stuck is that they're still kind of looking out into the world. And so what is inspired work? Inspired work, what I came to is it is the place where who you are within yourself and what you do in the world are integrated. It's the same thing. But I had to go through that process through the depression, and then kind of once I came out the other side, I started to do the inner investigation. I stopped looking out into the world to find like what job am I supposed to do, and I started to ask myself, well, who am I, and how do I show up in the world, and what is it I have to offer? And this is the biggest mistake I see people making when they're searching for their work or their inspired work, is they're still trying to find where do they fit in the world.
That is so awesome. Like, I feel like right there, you've already given us like such great insight and information. Who you are should be integrated in your work, because if there's such a discord, it's like right there is that friction or that pain. It's like you feel like you're being torn. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because it really, I have found our work culture really emphasizes separation. You know, there's this real acceptance that who you are at work is different than who you are in your life, or that your work and your life are separate entities. And for me, inspired work is all about integrating everything, all of who you are, and then everything you do. Like, what I like to say is I'm just myself all the time, but part of the time I get paid to be myself.
Awesome. This is so great. Like, imagine everyone can feel that way. Yeah.
Well, that's my vision. That's actually my vision. Imagine where everyone is feeling and actually living that. And so what inspired work is as well is when we start to do that inner exploration and really understand who we are, then we start to create work that allows us to bring that forward into the world. But to me, what's so magical about inspired work is that as we bring ourselves forward into the world, we learn more about who we are. So our inspired work grows us.
Oh, yeah.
And then as we grow our work. So it's this synergistic, like evolutionary path that we get on, where what I find where most people are unhappy in their jobs, like there's kind of one reason, it's because they've outgrown their work.
Amazing.
Like, work is too small for who they are.
Yeah.
And so for me, another difference between work and inspired work is works is static. It stays the same. You have a job description, you stay in that job, you outgrow it, you've done it for 8 years, and then you're all of a sudden wondering why you're frustrated. It's like, well, you've outgrown your work, but your work can't grow with you. So inspired work, because it comes from within who you are and it's a creation and you bring yourself forward, it grows with you. And to me, this is the beauty and the agony of it at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it grows with you, there's a challenge where you never have a sense of having arrived.
But that's awesome in a way.
There, I'm done it. It's like as soon as you reach that plateau, there's a whole new level of growth.
There's always more growth. And in a way, I mean, that's part of the joy and part of the challenge, but definitely, I love that. I love when you said, our inspired work grows us. Like, that's a quotable. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it grows us. We grow our work, and our work grows us. And that's the whole idea of integration.
I love that. Okay, so I want to know, what did it take you to create clarity in yourself?
Yeah, well, so I already mentioned one thing, which was the very first step is I had to stop looking out into the world for the answers I was seeking. And so this is, again, the work I do with other people, because everyone who comes in and they want to go through the program that I offer, they're still looking out into the world. So first step to clarity is to turn the lens back within ourselves and to be able to start tapping in to what it is we want and who we want to be, and tuning into our own wisdom, our own guidance, and starting to listen to our own inner voice. So for me, it really was about having that phase where my identity fell away and I could begin to hear myself. And when I say hear myself, I mean like what my heart truly desired, what my heart really wanted. So getting to clarity for me was really about releasing the ideas of who I thought I was, stop looking out into the world for the answers, and start to learn how to use my own inner guidance and to tap into my own heart's desires and start to use that as my guidance system instead of, looking
outside voices or even external advice. Would you say to even like put a stop to external advice?
Put a stop to external advice, and especially, and I like to say that the work I do with people, like the school, I mean, my business is the New School for Inspired Work, and I like to say that it's a space for not knowing, because what I found is when people are in the transition, close family and friends, they're really uncomfortable with people not knowing, right? There's always like, well, what are you going to do? And what does it look like? And have you figured it all out? Mm-hmm. And it's very frustrating when you're in the I don't know phase, because there's not a lot of support for being in the I don't know phase.
So true. Absolutely. So I love that you talk about, what it really takes is to go inside. And I love that. And I believe that. And it's so important. But for people listening, what would be like a tangible tip, like something they can actually do to create clarity?
Well, two things. One of them is clarity, like being able to tune into your own inner guidance requires us to become receivers. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is what most people try to do is they try to think their way to clarity. But thinking is actually an energetic transmission. You're sending thought waves out into the world. You're not actually tuning in and turning your body into a receiver and receiving information from what I call that which is connected to all that is, right? And that's my form of the universe or God or whatever. But I just say it's that which is connected to all that is. And so we need to become receivers. But the other aspect of that is to be able to be a receiver, you have to open yourself up to be able to fully feel. And this is where I see a lot of people getting stuck, is that they're not willing to receive the information because they're afraid of fully feeling whatever might come up. So we have to release resistance to fear around what we might hear. And
yes, because sometimes, so perhaps this is it. Someone decides, okay, I'm going to sit, I'm going to try to tune in. They hear something that's almost too scary. It's like they shut it off, they ignore it. So you're saying like number one is quit that resistance.
Yeah. Release the resistance, allow yourself to fully feel, because what happens when we fully feel is you are going to feel everything. You're going to feel the joy and the clarity. You're also going to feel the pain and the agony, but our guidance comes through our bodies. It doesn't come through our minds.
I love that. Our guidance comes through our bodies. One more, That's like a quote right there. That's awesome.
Okay, I'll make a note of that.
All right, so what would be like, so that's awesome for clarity. What would be, let's say, a first step for creating inspired work?
Well, and the first step is related to that, because the first step in my program is to transform limiting beliefs. And the way we go about transforming limiting beliefs is you have to actually have access to this guidance system. You have to have access to your body, because the way we identify limiting beliefs is by how our thoughts make us feel. So I'll just talk a little bit about how I perceive beliefs. I look at beliefs as chronic or patterned thinking. And I have this little flow chart. It's like our thoughts are, they become chronic, they become our beliefs become our stories, we act based on our stories, and then the experience of our lives are based on our actions. So what happens is, if we're having an experience of life we're not enjoying, for example, you don't like your work, chances are, if we go back, there's some kind of pattern thinking and thoughts that are creating that, it's creating a belief that's causing you to act in a certain way, that's keeping people stuck in that work story. Now, to be able to break that, we have to go back into feeling. We have to tune into the body and allow our body to say, is this belief serving me? And we do that through being able to access feeling. And so essentially, the first step is transforming limiting beliefs. But first, we have to identify what our beliefs are around work. That can be really challenging for people, because there's so many cultural beliefs that are really ingrained that people have sort of forgotten that maybe they're just beliefs and not even.
Got it. And just to give an example, like one belief might be, well, work should be hard, work should not be enjoyable.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here's one that usually makes people raise their eyebrows. Yeah. Here's a belief: I have to work. And people are like, well, don't we? And I'm like, do we? I mean, there are people around the world that don't work in the way that we describe work. So does that, does that mean that we all have to work? So, but it's not, beliefs are not necessarily about whether they're right or wrong, or whether you and I hold the same idea. Beliefs are about, is what I think serving me? So this is where I'm saying, to have clarity, you have to be able to feel, because two people can have the belief, say that work is hard, and someone might think, yeah, oh, that makes me feel awful. Like I feel the weight of that and I don't want to work. And another person might think, oh, I love a challenge and I love to grow and that's going to help me grow. So the same belief could serve two different people in two different ways. And this is why we have to use that feeling place. Clarity comes from feeling, because our bodies are giving us the wisdom. They're telling us, yes, this is serving you. Go in this direction. Believe this thought. Or no, when we don't feel good, then our bodies are saying, no, that thought is not serving you. Perhaps there's a new way, a new story, a new way you could think about work that could serve you better.
That's fascinating. And even when you said like that line, clarity comes from feeling, that is another, I'm going to have like a whole new list of quotes after this. So, I mean, this has been amazing. I felt like you shared so much like information that people hopefully will inspire them, and even give them like tips of like how to get clarity and like to feel into it and take time inside. Any final thing you want to share before you tell us how we can learn more about you and more about the School of Inspired Work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the final thing I'd like to share just about the idea of inspired work is what I really want everyone to know is that you are your work.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
And because again, I see so many people mistake maybe the container of their work for their work. And just, I'll use myself as an example, like the New School for Inspired Work. This is my business. This is how I deliver my gifts to the world. But the school is the container. My work actually comes from me. And so what I want everyone to know and to understand is that discovering your inspired work is really about discovering yourself and bringing yourself into the world through an external container. And that's really heartful and important to me that people get that it's not what they do that is important, it's who they are and how they show up in the world. And that's what your inspired work is. It's bringing yourself forward into the world through a container that you enjoy and love and makes the best use of your gifts.
That is amazing. Just even listening to it was so touching. And I think that one takeaway right there holds like so much power. I feel people can get hung up on the container. And I love what you're saying. It's the container. I don't know if you're saying that the container's secondary. Even.
It's the delivery vehicle. It's the medium through which you bring yourself into the world. But you are what's important. The medium is just the platform.
I love it. That's amazing. Okay, so what if someone wants to, because this sounds so good, what if someone wants to do your program? I know you've got these vision programs, and maybe you can tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, I'll just really quickly talk about the Vision program. It's a 3-part program. There's 3 different courses involved, Vision 1, Vision 2, Vision 3, and they're called Discovering Your Inspired Work, Creating Your Inspired Work, and Living Your Inspired Work. And the whole program is really intended to bring clarity. It's what we've been talking about today. It's really to help people who are in that gap. They know that their current work isn't really a true expression of who they are. They know it's not fulfilling them. They know they have more to give. They know they have a contribution they want to make, but they don't know how to bridge that gap. And what I did was I took my personal journey that took me actually years to go through, and I've condensed it into this program that I share with people. And so it really is for people who are wanting clarity about who they are and how they can bring themselves into the world. And right now I offer it in a couple of ways through a couple of mediums. And one of them is I am working with people one-on-one right now. And the other one is I've just finished developing an online course that I'm really excited to share with people as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited about that. And of course, all the information is on my website, and it's www.thenewschool.ca.
Awesome. And we'll also add those links in so people can go get there. And I want to thank you so much for coming today, sharing your wisdom and your insight and inspired work with us, Kiley. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Tova. It was great. And like I said, it's one of my favorite conversations. I can talk about it all day. So thanks for listening and thanks for asking me. It was great to be here.
Awesome. We'll talk again soon.